favor, raise your hand and say aye. All opposed? Okay, we have a majority in favor. So now I'd like to introduce Shelley Sanders, and we'll get started on our work session.
Good afternoon. I guess it's good evening, huh? Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. We are super excited. There's several of us in the audience that are here to celebrate and to share the hard work that started this year that will continue from years to come. We are going to, I'm going to try to click through this. Okay, we're going to take a deep dive into this board priority, and I'll just take a few minutes or seconds to read it. Meet each student where they are by utilizing an equity lens in decisions, actions, practices, and resource support. And I would say that the process that we went through this year is exactly this. It has honored this board priority. I'll take you through a quick overview of what you'll our path forward this evening. The first thing we'll do is we'll do a quick snapshot of the work that our teams did this year, and I'll kind of lay out the structure. Then we have 5 schools who are here to share their plans that will go into action next school year. And then once those are done, I will jump back up here and share next steps for next year, because I think that is vital in understanding of how we carry these plans forward. I will ask that if we have any questions, if we can hold those till the very end. Once our schools present, I'll come back up, share next steps, and then there's an opportunity for questions. That way we can sort of get a really broad picture of the work that happened this year and where we're going next. Okay, so the work that was completed this year was facilitated by our D teams. Every school building, traditional and non-traditional, and several departments had D teams this year. Most teams had 2 to 6 members. It depended upon the size of the building. There were 6 days of professional learning that were spread out through the course of the school year, and each one of those days had a different focus. I would say that we wrapped up our last day 6 on Tuesday, and we had a fantastic sharing symposium, and that is why you'll see some of the schools here to share their plans. The first 3 days of the work was all around awareness in regards to disposition of dignity and the indicators of belonging. And the dispositions of dignity are empathy, patience, openness, and listening. And the indicators of belonging are appreciation, validation, acceptance, and being treated fairly. These 3 days really narrowed in on what does dignity look like, how does it look in our system. That last day 3, where it says structural inequity and exclusion, really allowed us the opportunity to start looking at data. There were several data points that we were able to leverage. We were able to leverage climate survey data. We were able to leverage academic data. We were able to leverage discipline log entry data, attendance data. So we were able to use several different data points to start to look at, are there places in our system where we could have dignity challenges? And then we hop into our action days. And I would say probably the action days were my favorite days. And the reason why is it really forced us to move out of assumptions and really move into listening to the people that we serve. And so on day 3, we started to look at data that transferred into day 4, and then we really got deep into empathy interviews and really saying, if this is what the data is telling us, what group would be impacted, and how do we have conversations with them to learn more? The part that really just heightened this work was that we spent probably a half a day on how to listen to honor dignity versus listening to violate dignity. And when you are when you are asking questions that cause you to be vulnerable and causes your system to be vulnerable, it can be really easy to become defensive and to want to fix and solve. But this really pulled us out of that, right? Our goal was to honor dignity and really hear the voices of those that are being impacted. And you'll hear that in the plans later. That was the piece that probably was the most time consuming, but it's probably where we got our greatest data. And then after that, teams were able to then take the information that they gathered from the empathy interviews and the quantitative data and really look at what are possible treatments that we can put in place that would honor dignity. Several of our teams chose to focus on support staff or staff as a whole. Several of them focused on students only, and then we had probably about a handful that decided we needed to do both. The beautiful part about these treatments is buildings were able to make it specific to their needs. Oftentimes when we have training and professional learning, it can feel like a one-size-fit-all, but buildings got the opportunity to make it uniquely purposeful for their cultures and their communities. Okay, so at this time, we are going to start our sharing of the buildings. Please take notes, write down questions, and then as we move forward at the end, we will keep our amazing leaders here who are going to share, and we can answer all of your questions. So the first school up is going to be Lee Summit Elementary. And here comes their principal, Tracy Sanders.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. So we were challenged with doing a lot of data review, but I will say that our most favorite part of the entire process was the empathy interviews. We made a choice in our building that we did empathy interviews with our 3rd and 4th graders because our 3rd and 4th graders are going to remain in our building next year. So we chose to do 16 empathy interviews. We're a small building. We made sure that our empathy interviews were a good cross-representation of our student population. So our students are 45% non-white. Our 16 students, we made sure that represented the exact population of our students. We also made sure it represented the exact population of our students that are on IEPs, our students that are gifted. So it matched our students that are free and reduced lunch. That was powerful information. And so from that, we developed our problem statement. What is it that our students are telling us? And we matched that to our panorama data, our academic data, and our problem came out loud and clear. Our students wanted to be more involved in our school. We have activities that are before and after school, but in our building, the barrier that we see is we have many, many students that cannot get there because of transportation. We are one of the highest walk zones in Lee Summit R7. And whenever daylight savings time happens, it's dark. Next year, we're a late building, so we won't even get out of school until 4:15. In order for us to have any activities after school, they won't be getting out of activities until it's dark. And so we posed that to our leadership team. What are we going to do about it? We also started having conversations with staff. And our staff, only staff members that are certified can be paid stipends by the district to supervise before and after school clubs. They wanted to also participate in before and after school clubs. We have many that do it on a volunteer basis. So we made a decision that we felt like for 100% of our students to belong, we needed to provide that opportunity during the school day. And so next year, our leadership team came together and said, okay, how are we going to do this? We felt it was so important for belonging that on Fridays, we're going to provide 45 minutes every Friday after Labor Day. Kindergarten through 2nd grade is going to be activity-based or club-based, where they just get the opportunity to explore, and it's going to match our RIA 6 standards. Our 3rd through 5th grade students, it's going to be leadership or service-based. They're going to actually facilitate those clubs with a staff member. It will be 100% of our staff members, so certified or non-certified. Our students are actually helping us design what those clubs are. So we had a student that during the empathy interview said to us, Mrs. Sanders, we need to have a grounds crew. We need to have students that actually help our building manager. We're right in the middle of downtown Lee Summit. You should see what our grounds look like after a festival in downtown Lee Summit. They said to us, we need to help Mr. Gus. And so that's going to be a club, and our building manager is going to supervise that. We had another 3rd grade student who was an ELL student who came to us and said, he's also gifted, said, Mrs. Sanders, we want to have a school newspaper. Can we do that? That's going to be another service club. That 3rd grade student's going to facilitate that service club. So those are some of the things that we're going to do next year. Currently, we have 4 staff members that serve on our District D team. Next year, we had 9 staff members that came to us and said, we want to be on the D team. So it's going to be a 9 staff member D team. We're also implementing a student D team next year that will be facilitated by a student. That's one of the service teams. Am I out of time already? Probably. The other thing that we are implementing next year is we did empathy interviews with 16 students. Next year, we're doing empathy interviews with every 2nd through 5th grade student 2 quarters. So we're going to do that 1st and 3rd quarter. They were so powerful for us that we decided we're also going to do empathy interviews with every staff member, certified and non-certified. We're going to do it the opposite quarters of students. So we'll do that 2nd and 4th quarters. We already implemented for the end of this year. So we're doing empathy interviews with 100% of our staff the end of this school year. That's how powerful they are. That is our dignity plan.
Good afternoon. I'm Carrie Harrison from Lee Summit High. Just wanted to share a little bit about what we've been doing at Tiger High. Where we chose to focus primarily and really singularly was with our adults. Our adults have had a tremendously difficult year, as most adults in the profession have. But looking at our panorama data, that we've looked at both fall data and spring data, we were able to gather some good information from our adults on where their needs lie, where they feel they have a voice, where they feel like they don't. And then we also have taken our 6 members of our team, and each of them has held empathy interviews with at least 4 staff members. And so we have a total of 24 staff that we conducted our interviews with. We've divided those across all of our departments. So every department and classification group was met with, had an opportunity to talk about places where they felt like they had a voice within our organization, where they felt like they hadn't had a voice, had an opportunity to talk about when things were going really well for them and what were those components that made that successful, and talk about times that were challenging and what were the barriers that were placed in front of them that made them challenging in that particular moment. We've decided that we need to start with building morale, improving our culture and climate among our faculty, and then in the hopes that that trickles down to our students. But first, we have to put the oxygen mask on the adults. So that's where we have focused our plan. So primarily, we're looking at our own school culture. We're looking at the interpersonal and institutional belonging. Quite a bit of what we heard from our empathy interviews were folks who said, I have the power to make everybody else feel included. I have felt like I've had an opportunity to have my voice. I just maybe haven't exercised that to the degree that I think I need to. And so not only were we able to gather some information from folks, but it also became an empowering moment for them to talk about everybody is a team at Lee Summit High School, and we are all responsible for moving forward or moving backward, however it happens to be. And so for others to be able to see that it does really require each of us to work together. Excuse me. So things that we've gone through clearly. We participated, we were in first cohort like the rest of these folks. So we started this process with belonging through a culture of dignity way back in the fall. We took our building through parts of this in November, and we talked specifically about the difference between honoring dignity, particularly for our students, and then how that differs from granting, gaining, losing respect, because those are different concepts, as we learned through the core collaborative, and really spent some time trying to unpack those 2 terms. So keeping a focus on honoring the dignity of every individual that we interact with. As a result of issues that were happening in the fall with our students and our teachers, in the fall I pulled together the student principals advisory group, and we've met regularly since then to work through a number of different concerns that they have, and they've come up with some great plans throughout the year. So the students were able to join in and start problem solving as well. And then we extended that this spring to all of our certified staff. So we've gone back through in the last month and a half and meetings with every teacher within the building. Here is the vision for our physical building, as well as the rest of the institution that comes along once we take full possession of our building. But then how does that translate into our mission? So why are we doing the work that we're doing? And then we are finishing up work on the core values that we as adults will hold as the non-negotiables. So how we do our business, not just why, but how will each one of us conduct ourselves and hold each other accountable as well. So the goal is, by the time we wrap up school next Friday, those things will be finalized, neatly packaged, and everybody knows that starting point as we've kind of finished up this year. Then clearly you see the empathy interviews on there. Excuse me. The next work for the D team is to continue to dig into those empathy interviews. They're very rich. And so continuing to discover some of those additional themes and capitalizing on those positive pieces that we captured from there. So again, how do we go back into the empowerment and build back into that whole concept that it's going to take everybody, and everybody has a role here in lifting each other up, supporting each other. We've got a number of challenges, and it's just navigating our space right now has been a struggle this year. And so continuing with the shifting that moves around our physical space, and will continue all of next year as well, knowing that you may be in a situation where your room is being disrupted right now, but in a few months it's going to be me. And so practicing that patience and tolerance for each other as we go through that. So you see on there then that we'll come back into those core values. And then our focus all next year is really finalizing our plans on how we're going to utilize our physical structure to best meet the needs of our students and be prepared to provide them the education that they need, while also working on making sure that our adults feel like they are working to include others and that they are included and do belong at Tiger High. So that's our plan.
Good evening, everyone. Haven't had an opportunity to present in front of you guys, so first I would like to say it's a privilege and pleasure to share with you. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank you guys on behalf of our students and our staff and our teachers. And I would definitely be remiss. I have some wonderful colleagues here in the audience. Have one of our focus facilitators who's helping out with this program, Mrs. White. I have our building sub, Para, some of everything, Miss Williams in the audience, and then two very important individuals that we collaborate with on a regular basis. With the family court, I have Centoria Roulette Jackson and Thomas Johnson, and very critical, important people in us providing the services to the young men and the young ladies at Hilltop. So just want to take that opportunity to introduce them to you and let them know that there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are working. I often tell our young people to be kind to everybody, but especially here in Lee Summit, because there's a lot of people behind the scenes who are really looking out for you guys and your education that you may not know, you may run into. They often get a chance to meet some of the individuals who've come to visit, so it's just a great opportunity, and we really appreciate what you guys are doing to support us there. Hilltop School, I've been there since 1989. Left and went to Fort Osage and served at a school called McCune School. We served at-risk youth there as well, and then matriculated back here to Lee Summit in 2013 to start this program here. In my experiences there, it's a village. As you can see, we're a community of people. There's a community here as well, and our number one job is we're doing well if the children are doing well. The challenge with our program is that we have a very transient population. of kids. Some of them haven't had good experiences in schools. Sometimes we have them for anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months or a little bit longer. So we have a very short amount of time to be able to, number one, make them feel welcome in a place to where they probably know very few people. Again, many of our kids have been a part of some very traumatic situations. So this study that we did was very important in how we could make our youth feel welcome and to feel like they're being connected and to being helped. One thing that I have a privilege to do, I wear a lot of different hats. I'm able to meet the kids when they first get there. I do their testing. And one of the things that I want to find out is who they are as a person. One thing that I do find out is a lot of our young people, they know what grade they're in. They can tell me, I'm Mr. Montgomery, I'm in 11th grade, I'm in 10th grade. But when I ask them the famous question, how many credits do you have? Some of them will say, well, what is that? I have the Lee Summit graduation requirements with me where we will sit down and we will get their transcript. And one of the conversations I have, they know what $1 million looks like on an asset sheet. They know sometimes it is 6 zeros. But when I ask them how many credits will determine if you're a freshman or sophomore, they don't know. We have conversations about going to school and completing school all the way. I think sometimes they think when they're in school, if they get out, then I still may get my grade, and not knowing that if you're not there to complete that course, then you haven't completed that grade. So it's a great opportunity to sit down with these young people and to find out about their educational path. And a lot of times this is the first conversation. So during our study, we decided that we wanted to put together a comprehensive program to where kids are able to find about their educational status. One thing that we know about our students, they have high self-esteem. I mean, they sometimes it's over-exaggerated, but one issue that they do have is they have low self-value. They really don't understand, and they're grappling with where is my place in society? How do I connect? So one thing that we wanted to do is that I wanted to be able to allow these kids to come in. We do a lot of testing and assessments to look at their test scores, their pre and post-test scores when they come, to look at career assessments, and to also examine their evidence of learning while they're at Hilltop. And our goal is to create an advisory program during the morning. We will put school to the side and we will talk to kids about their career and their future and their goals, to where we're able to allow them to build portfolios and to put evidence of learning of their experience at Hilltop. And every week we meet in a level movement meeting, and that's a great opportunity for them to be able to look at and to plan how they're progressing throughout the week. And then at the end of their time at the program with us at Hilltop, they have pre-furlough meetings, and this is a great opportunity for them to display the evidence of their learning while they've been with our program. We want them to be able to leave with something and to leave with some type of a plan or a path. Again, it's a very transient population that we have, and we, again, want them to be able to know a path that they want to go academically and with their career. So that's our goal that we're going forth with next year. We have experimented with this particular time. Mrs. White and I will do a triage time at the beginning of the school year. So we're going to use that allotted time going into next year, where every staff member will be connected with at least 2 to 3 kids, and that we will spend time getting to know them. We will spend time exploring their scores, their career assessments, and to just be able to begin to build that portfolio for them, so that they will leave with some evidence of what they've accomplished while they've been at Hilltop. So that's our goal. And again, I really appreciate what you guys have done and the support that you guys have offered. And again, we really appreciate and thank you for all that you've done.
While she's coming up, Andre, do you want to introduce yourself? Some of these people don't know who you are, so.
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Andre Montgomery. I'm the administrator at Hilltop. I still consider myself an educator. more so than being the administrator, because I'm a teacher of adults as well as young people. But my colleague, Ms. Roulette Jackson.
Thank you, Board, for the opportunity, and for the sake of time, I'll make it as quick as possible. But I could not miss this time to highlight such wonderful leadership in an educational staff that we have had the pleasure of working with. He is always saying how great it is to work with us, but it's even more outstanding to work with leadership and educational staff that do not give up on children. I am simply amazed in my 17 years of working with the court. It's not a kid that has not come to the attention of our school that has not improved in some kind of way. That's amazing to say that when a child has arrived that they were not able to read, but now they can read. For a child who says that I was behind and didn't know my credits to now be caught up in credits and be able to graduate. There is not enough time to say how wonderful this leadership and this educational staff is, and I wanted to bring that to attention and not miss that moment. It is absolutely a pleasure. Something that I share with them as we are trauma-informed in every lens, no matter what child comes to us, as I asked a student of kids one day who were considered the most challenging, right? I just asked one simple question: have you ever been misunderstood? And when I asked that question, every child in the room raised their hand. So what we see is sometimes, as others may see as a challenge, we see it as an opportunity. And so I could not miss this moment of highlighting this staff, this leadership team, and the wonderful job they do every day. I hope Ms. White is also able to express what she's taken as an analogy that I hope she will share is the child in the box. And I've encouraged her to share it with any educational staff that is willing to listen, as well as Ms. Williams, who takes the time to tutor youth who are trying to get up to speed, where they need to be educationally, no matter where they are. So those students excelling that he's talked about is only at the hands of this educational staff. And I just wanted to make sure that I presented that to the board this evening. Thank you.
Hello again. I won't talk nearly as long as I did last time, I promise. Okay, Emily's got me on the clock. So you heard a little bit about our plan last month when you were at the building. We talked a little bit about our some of the things that we're doing with our STREAM program, and so the really cool thing about this work is that it fit beautifully within the structure of that STREAM program. And so some of the our problem statement or our challenge for this year is, and what came out of our empathy interviews and some of the other data that we looked at, was creating a more inclusive culture. As we again, in a similar fashion to Hilltop, we have kids that kind of come in and out of our program throughout the year, and so creating opportunities for us to really get kids engaged, give them an opportunity to connect with each other, connect with staff, and that was what came loud and clear from our empathy interviews, is that they feel connected to staff, but they don't always feel connected to the other kids in the program. And so that's really going to be the focus of our plan. So our focus areas were inclusion, independence, and acknowledgement. And so institutional interpersonal belonging. You want to flip it over for me? And so, again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about STREAM Team because you heard about that last month. Some of the things that are happening, we're restructuring our Friday schedule to put in opportunities for kids to have those opportunities for interpersonal interaction and to build relationships with other students. Again, when you bring in kids from 3 different schools, well, really 6 different schools with the middle school, that can be sometimes a challenge. Rethinking our multi-purpose room, and I'm really excited. I totally Kyle never got to speak last month, but he was still gracious and offered to help with our restructuring our multi-purpose room, and that work is moving forward. I met with him the other day. We actually got a piece of furniture coming from DLR Group. It's going to be delivered tomorrow. It's like the first kind of big thing in our creating that student union space in our building. And so we're going to be repainting and redoing some things, kind of reimagining that space, and then looking at our schedule in general and putting in those opportunities for kids to have opportunities to interact and have that going on. The student voice and choice comes into play in that 3-day onboarding that we're going to do with all new students, and then with any students that are already in the program while the onboarding for new students is going on. They're going to have opportunities to explore a lot of different whether it's vocational, whether it's, things that they're interested in, whatever it is, and they're going to have the chance to kind of, in a not quote unquote non-academic way, explore some different things that are going on. One of the other things that came out of our interviews was their ability to stay connected with their home high school, which is very important to us. And so they mentioned when it's a Spirit Week at their home high school, being able to go to a pep assembly or stay connected in that way. And so we're exploring things. Dr. Sanders is going to be helping us with transportation to get kids back to their buildings to be part of some of those things as well. And then we're going to just continue the work. Our D team's going to expand as well to include more people. We're going to take our staff through the D team through the book, and we'll continue to use. So we base this all on that PSSM scale that's found in the book, which we found to be a really, really effective tool for our kids. And we got more kids to participate in that than when we put out Panorama. And so we felt like that was a really good gauge and an opportunity to really hear kids and do some of that work. And we've gotten kids involved, and kids are excited about it. They've already torn lockers out in one of the sections in our hallway upstairs. They're putting in a seating area at the top, at the top stairs. So kids are really getting excited about this work, and so we are equally excited. So that's the plan.
My name is Jeff Naminsky. I'm the assistant principal over at Summit Technology Academy. I'm joined here with two of our instructors. This is Mr. Fred Wilson, who's an allied health instructor, as well as you've probably met Mrs. Ashley Turner. She's with the teacher educator program, as well as the Grow Your Own program. So I just want to give a quick update on just what is STA. It's a half-day program for students. It serves juniors and seniors. We have about 550 students. And they're from not just the 3 Lee Summit high schools, but really 33 sending high schools from about an hour north, south, east, and all the way to the borderline, Kansas-Missouri border. We have that many students coming to us with it. So that comes with its own unique challenges. We have urban students, suburban students, rural students. We have private, public, and even homeschooled students coming together. And all of them have said, just like a transition from middle school to high school, just like a transition from high school to college, there is a transition coming to Summit Tech. And they come there to be a part of a specific career program, whether it's engineering, computer science, health science, human services, all of those areas. They're coming for that, but they also want to be a part of something. So that's why we thought this work was really important. And I'm going to let them do the majority of the talking on the real work.
Good evening. So as you can see, our problem statement was how we facilitate building relationships and communities within the 11th and 12th grade students that we have. We wanted to know how students were understood, did they feel safe, and were they included. We had 86% of our students complete the spring Panorama survey, and in that survey, we looked to see if there were any factors that might come up with some of those things that we identified. For instance, we looked at gender, male, female. We looked at in-district versus out-of-district. We also looked at attendance and what grade they were in, junior versus senior, or grade they were earning, A, B, C, D, F. And all of these things really didn't seem to direct us anywhere as to why we found the findings we did on our survey. So we dug a little deeper and looked at the only one thing we could really put our finger on was probably race. Generally, African American was below or significantly different. So when we looked at those and found that we had African American was probably more significant, we invited 2 students to empathy interview. And the questions that we asked were, do you feel understood at your school? And tell us some times when you may have felt that way. Or when did you feel connected with another adult at your school? And how much do you matter? Tell us times when you felt like you mattered at your school. And the things that came out of that were more like you need to ask the other question as well to kind of dig everywhere around. So we also then opened our empathy surveys, empathy interviews up to 35 other students. So we didn't just ask, tell me a time when you felt understood at school, but are there times when you didn't feel understood, or times that you don't have a connection with an adult at your school? Or are there times when you don't feel that you matter at school, at Summit Technology Academy? So those are some reasons we came up with those questions. We looked to find some reasons for those answers, and some of the information that we have with our other empathy interviews. I'll let Ashley now talk to those.
Hi, good evening. I think really our results speak to the process. I can't say that enough. We can look at data, we can look at percentages, and we can assume, but that's harmful. And I loved partaking in the empathy interview process. Not only do I just love talking to students, but it really gave us direction. And I think that that's obviously the most important. We need to see the change. Of our 37 students we talked to, 3 in particular indicated more of a desire to see more students that looked like them, and I think that that makes sense. Even though 3 said it, we do believe that more thought it, they just maybe didn't say it, so that is going to be an area that we focus on. And then we will also focus on the collaboration piece within the classroom. That was another piece that a majority of the students said, I really feel connected when I'm talking to my peers and when I have the opportunity to interact and collaborate on projects, on activities that are happening in the classes. So from those 2 really pieces that we saw, we really are going to take actions addressing both of those starting next year. Some of the work we've already started, little things like revamping the website to represent that. I know Dr. Bonison has met with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and other community and industry organizations to actively look at increasing our partners as far as recruiting instructors, looking at guest speakers and clients that students can identify with. So we are going towards that. But one student that I talked to in particular said, you know, you do great recruiting in our feeder classes. So you're going in with allied health to talk to the science classes, but what about going into the Black student unions and talking to those student organizations, which I felt like was a phenomenal suggestion, something that we will continue to look at and do and take action towards next year. And then as far as that professional development piece, really training the staff to look at those collaboration activities, not just focusing on those get-to-know-you activities that feel good the first day, but continuing that. And what we were finding is the earlier the better, and the more consistent those collaboration pieces were throughout the year, that better sense of belonging.
I just want to take a moment to thank them for all, one, coming to a board meeting on a Thursday before, the last week of school, but also digging in and doing the hard work, right? I think oftentimes it takes less work when something is prepackaged and cookie cutter and you do it and you check it off your list. It takes a lot more effort to really create something that is specific towards individual needs. And so now I will just take the opportunity to answer the question that you all are probably thinking, which is, well, what's next? Right? Here we are at the end of the school year. These are beautiful plans. What's next? Okay. So our D teams next year will continue as they are. We will have 2 full-day meetings next year versus the 6. The first meeting will be held in September, and I will facilitate that meeting. The focus of that meeting will be really nailing down the action steps of these plans, right? So we have some broad plans. Some are more detailed, but we're going to put some dates on them. We're going to get them on a calendar. Like, we're going to really get to that space where we're holding ourselves and our buildings and our systems accountable for it. Also at that point, what supports are needed from SLC, what supports are needed from building administration, from various departments. So we'll really work through getting that nailed down. Then in the winter time, I will conduct 2 to 3 hour walkthrough collaboration visits at each site to see where they are in the process, what supports do they need, how are things going, what adjustments have been made, sort of a status update where we are. And to really, just get the feel for how is this being implemented in live time. I think that is the next phase to this, so that those check-ins will happen in the winter. In the spring, we will meet again, and there'll probably be some homework before our spring meeting, which will look checking your data, what areas are you looking at, conducting empathy interviews, like that whole process. It took us a year to get through there. If we tighten it up, we can probably get it done within a month. We'll come together. John Kraneppel's going to come to that last meeting. We're going to do sort of this check-in where we are, celebrate, share, and then recalibrate for the following year, with the idea that this is a cycle that continues every year for every building, for departments. So these teams will stay intact. And as you heard, many teams will be expanding next year. So that's super exciting. That also means that this work is trickling to the building level, right? It's not just gonna live in this building. So that's one layer. The next layer will be the district D teams that I facilitate with the parents, staff, and students. Those will continue also next year. I got a lot of pushback. I won't say pushback. I got a lot of persuading from the parents and the students to include middle school in the district level D teams next year. So we're gonna go down that path too and kind of include some of our middle school kiddos in that. But what you'll see here is sort of a layout of our plan for really exploring dignity next year. We do want to kick off the first quarter meeting with John coming in virtually and kind of setting the stage for dignity and the importance of it. So that will be the plan next year for our District D teams. And I think you all are more than welcome to attend those. STA hosted the Student D team this past week, and they had a great time. I think we have 3 kids who want to sign up to join the Allied Health class next year, so that was super cool. The next layer will be our D facilitators. Anytime systems are rolling in new professional learning, whether it's math, whether it's science, whether it's literacy, whether it's dignity, you start in this space where you really got to bring in that outside help to make the learning happen, right? And then you move to this space of sustainability. And what the defacilitators will allow us to do is to sustain work and get it out systematically to all LSR 7 employees and students. And so what we're looking at right now is having 60 defacilitators, 2 in every building. We'll have some within departments. And our goal is that these defacilitators will have facilitator training, right? So we're not just gonna throw them out to the wolves, right? We're gonna really spend some time learning how to be facilitators. I'm super excited because I was never trained on how to be a facilitator. So I get to go through the training also. We will then decide on the content focus. We are projected right now to have 3 one-hour sessions. Depending upon department, we may have to smash some of that in or chunk it out depending upon what we can get staff members. But we will sort of map out our overall goals in regards to focus content for the year, and then we will create our content together. And then we will practice presenting and facilitating the content together. And then those defacilitators will coordinate with their building principals on when they're going to facilitate that work at the building level or with departments. We already have it built in sort of our overall project PD plan for next year, so it's already embedded. But we have ranges which will allow buildings to make it fit within their schedule, right, to create that autonomy. One of the questions I got from staff members when kind of started, you plant seeds and see what people think, and they're like, well, hey, when are we going to create content that's specific to our needs? And we're going to get there. The goal is in 23-24, we will be in the space where we're able to do that. What this also allows us is the opportunity to ensure that whenever we're working with a consultant for content, that if we have to change, if we change paths or if there's a disruption in that service, it does not stop our work, right? So this really sort of insulates us to be able to continue the work regardless of who we are contracting with for our content. So that is the powerful piece. We kind of own our own destiny on this. And then the plan is second semester, our D facilitators in conjunction with building principals or D teams will then create or help create, facilitate the student D teams within each building, and also within departments having D teams too. So that we will sort of see this spread of D teams, D facilitators, and just the pathway that Dignity can reach all of our staff and students. So that is next steps for next year. I think we have a really tight plan for going forward, and we're super excited. I will say that we have probably about 30 people signed up that have expressed interest to be a D facilitator. Some of them are classified staff member, which we're super excited about. Some of them are building principals, music teachers, behavior interventionists. Like, it's just, it runs the gamut, and we're super excited that we have such commitment across positions, across the district, that are committed to this work. So that completes our presentation. It is now time for questions.
That's great. Thank you, Shelley. So what questions do we have? Board Member Fritchie?
Just a couple of observations, and then I guess a question about follow through at the end of this. I was able to be here for the Tuesday morning, and I did have to leave early because a personal issue in my family. So, but in the time that I was here, what I really enjoyed hearing from the small group I was in, they were vetting each other's plans and what each of their D teams had come up with. And I was really impressed that with number one, all the teams used empathy interviews. The information that they gleaned from those interviews, they personalized that very much. That's what's so impressive, and that is that each of these groups, it means something to them because it's their information, it's their building, it's their data, it's their kids, or their, in the case of, I heard the presentation from Early Childhood Center, their parents, in that case, because they couldn't interview the little ones, but they interviewed the parents and how they could be more helpful to the parents and so helping the children. And so I heard some really good ideas. For example, Campbell Middle School, I was sitting in on that one, and they're talking about also their club program, like Lee Summit Elementary is, and how they can facilitate more kids into their club program. So as I listened to these reports, I very much appreciated how each of you individualized that to your buildings and your kids. And I know that next steps will involve some, obviously it's going to involve follow through, it's going to involve support from this level, and it's going to probably involve some finances to support that. When we're talking about if we need to add more buses for transportation for after school activities or things like that, how far have we gotten into the weeds on that, I guess is my question.
Well, there's a lot of weeds there, right? I would say that some of the weeds are decisions that buildings can make, or decisions that my department can support buildings in making. Some decisions are going to be a little broader than that. But I think what buildings found, at least in my follow-up conversations, is that they feel like things are being talked about that need to be talked about, right? Like there is movement, there are conversations that they are being heard. I would say in those, in the sharing symposium and those plans, there were some really common glaring themes that if you sat in one group and listened to 5 different presentations, you could pull. And I just want to say, I should have said this earlier. Thank you to you all that were able to come out and kind of be a fly on the wall and listen to these plans. We had several buildings that tackled support staff, right? Our support staff, our paras, they don't feel like they belong, our recess clerks. Like that data there was just such a big discrepancy, and that became the focus of their work. And so it was, well, they need to be included. And then what kind of leeway do we have to include them? Where can we include them? And at the district level, I think listening to those and already making steps, I think this year will be the first year, don't let me misspeak, Dr. Buck, that we compensate our support staff for attending Convo, right? That's huge, right? That's a way to say, you matter here, we want you here. So it's steps like that we're taking at the district level, that buildings are also looking at. How do we, because we know our buildings don't run without our support staff, right? So there were just so many themes that just rose out of those plans. It was pretty magnificent to be able to listen to all of them. But the plan is to be in the weeds with buildings, right? And if there's something that is leveraging, how do we work together to make that happen? Also, sort of, I have a meeting with Kaufman next week. We finished a Beloved cohort, and they are looking at funding us with a potential an additional grant, and that to help us fund this work. And so it could be a possibility that we could have dignity grants that schools could apply for that could help offset the cost of some of this.
That'd be great. And I just wanted to say that I think the common thing that I found in listening to you all and listening on Tuesday morning was that the importance of those empathy interviews is digging deep and getting out there and talking to your students or talking to your staff members. And I think the more we can expand on those empathy interviews, the better, because it just gives you that much more data to go on to help our kids and our staff.
Absolutely.
Thank
the
you.
quantitative data is one piece, but we have to
Right,
get
the
that qualitative piece.
Yeah. Thank you.
Board Member Murdoch?
Just wanted to offer a couple of thoughts, and then I do have one question for you on this. The first thing is as all of the people were presenting, I think it was easy to picture what all of the buildings probably would be saying, right, around this in terms of individualizing what's going on within each one of their buildings. You know, it's sometimes difficult to look past what's going on this year. So I appreciated Principal Harrison, you know, bringing up it's a struggle sometimes, right? And I would probably say that is true across every building in our district this particular year. You know, sometimes we ask as board members, what can we do, right, to help impact things? Well, one thought is not even necessarily at a district level, but I see Mr. Montgomery coming up here. We can get after the county to help with facilities at Hilltop. That's an area that we can help, right? Continuing to impress upon our county who runs that facility that there are resources that are needed there. And we can contact those people, and that should be on us to do that, right? That's just a small thing that we can do for somebody like Hilltop who, you know, you unfortunately are at the whim of the county from a resource perspective, right? From a facilities perspective, sorry. And so, you know, sometimes when we ask those questions, I hope that we know, let's seek out those answers, make sure that we know who are the appropriate contacts to actually try to impact positive change for our buildings and stuff like that. So I think that also is huge. My question to you, Ms. Sanders, is going to be this. Every building comes up with a plan, right? Everybody's going to get details of the plan. What is the flexibility to pivot as we see new issues arise each year? Because I think we'll see that as we transition every school year.
I love that question, so I appreciate it. The idea is that the plan is not stagnant, right? It evolves every year. Sunset Valley is a great example of what will happen. So Sunset Valley sort of leveraged their panorama data last year and realized that it was off, right? So they went into this year and had initiated a leadership academy. Every kid has a job. I mean, they just kind of went all in based on that panorama data last year. So the focus of their plan was really looking at and doing empathy interviews around, is this working, right? Do you feel like you belong? Does when you're doing your job, does that create a sense of belonging for you? Because I think oftentimes we put these things in place and we hope they're working. But then looking at that data, the quantitative piece, and then aligning it with those empathy interviews and then say, okay, let's find out if it is. And they are tweaking some things that they rolled out this year based on those empathy interviews. And then you may have, I could see buildings being like, okay, this worked. Now we're on to something else because our data is telling us something else. Buildings needs change all the time. And so buildings will have the opportunity to flex and adjust plans. I hope that they will. I would be very concerned with the building that's running the same plan for multiple years. What I will say is that our building D teams and our administrators have been phenomenal. Phenomenal. This year was so uncertain at so many points. And you know, they stuck to it, right? They didn't give up. They were on me. When does it happen? What are we? I mean, they were there. The commitment level of our staff is through the roof, and I hope that I can convey that. Because it is, and this work would not have gone on without them, because there were some tough points in this school year that we probably could have all given up and kind of just said, we'll deal with that next year. And they didn't. And so I'm very proud of the work. I think that just also shows how much they value where we need to go, like how we need to move things along. So I think we're good, but I'll stay on that.
Board Member Eslick?
Thank you. Actually, before I ask a question, I also just want to start out by saying thank you to everyone who presented today. It sounds like all of you are doing some really great work, and I think it's really important and valuable that you're making your students and your staff feel like you belong. I attended at least one of the sessions for the DEI cohorts, and I agree there was a lot of great information that came out of those sessions, and it was clear that there's a lot of dedication to these D teams trying to make an impact in their buildings. So I think that's wonderful. So my question is, I know I'm a new school board member and I haven't been here very long, but prior to joining the board, you know, I participated in the DT meeting for parents. And during that course, I also spoke with quite a few teachers who were interested in participating in the D teams, whether it be mostly as a teacher. Some of them joined as parents instead. And there was some concern that was expressed that they weren't picked for reasons of potentially their either religious or political beliefs. And so I guess I'm concerned how we reach those groups and allow them to feel like their opinions of how maybe to approach DEI in their buildings can also be included in the conversation, how they would communicate that if potentially their building leader is not kind of scooping them up and into that group. So maybe you could speak to that and reaching those people.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think oftentimes when it comes to selecting staff for anything, I think it can be a slippery slope, right? I think you select that teacher, but you don't select that teacher, and that teacher feels like, well, why didn't I get selected for that? And we can come up with a laundry list of reasons of why we feel we didn't get selected. So when it came to districts, D teams for staff and parents, I did not select anyone. It was very much an opt-in, and I think for that reason, for the D teams that were in the building, principals were on short notice to gather some people, but we did have some conversations around, let's ensure that we're sort of spreading philosophy views, just where we all stand, and just so that we can get a mix of staff members. When it comes to D facilitators, this is also individuals expressing interest, and I am so hopeful that we will have staff members who may not have been a part of D team because it was such a small group. We think about subs. I want to say that for every 6 days, for every 6 days, we had close to 80 subs. So and that's just staff that required subs, not to mention the staff that doesn't require subs. So we were close to about 120 staff members that were out for each of those 6 days. So we had to really cap that. If we could have done it, it would have been more. But the D facilitators will also allow an opportunity for staff members to sort of express interest outside of the building principal, right? Which I think is also important, because oftentimes I think our building principals are trying to navigate letters training, inquiry cohort, all of these pieces of the puzzle, and as being a building principal trying to do that in my prior life is tough. So I do appreciate that question, and hopefully the defacilitators will allow people to opt in. You saw a lot of our buildings are expanding their D teams that are going to meet in building. They're going to keep this process and these meetings up. So I think we'll see more people come on board in that route too.
Thank you.
Board Member Marshall?
Thank you. My question is around the empathy interviews. And I understand that the purpose of it is really to extract information. But my question is, those that are conducting the empathy interviews, can you talk a little bit about the type of training that they receive? So in the unfortunate event that something is discovered during one of these interviews that calls for a higher level of intervention, can you talk about what that looks like and how that process goes?
So during, in the prep for the empathy interviews, we spent all of day 4, so that's 6 hours, learning how to conduct empathy interviews, right? This idea that in these empathy interviews, our number one mission is to honor dignity, and we really talk through in what ways can we devalue dignity in those moments. And so we did a lot of work. We did a lot of practice rounds of interviews. And so the majority of the interviews were conducted by our D team members. Some schools did have other staff do it just because of scheduling and subs and things like that. But the questions were created with those groups. Most of the questions were intended to be open-ended. So can you tell us about a time where you felt like you've belonged? What did that look like? Can you tell us a time where you didn't feel like you belong? The biggest thing about those empathy interviews is they are not a moment to fix, a moment to interrogate, a moment to become defensive. They are truly a moment to learn. And so that in regards to like what training, that was that day 4 training. It was all day. If something lifts out of those in regards to what would, you know, as a mandated reporter, what we would be required to report, we would do that as an educator anyway. And so we would report something that would lift out of those. If it was in regards to like discrimination or harassment under policy AC, we would follow that pathway that we have forward. So those pathways are still there if something lifts up out of those interviews where there's an experience that a student felt that they were discriminated against, harassed because they're a member of a protected class, or if we find out that a student has potentially been abused or something like that. We follow our normal board protocols.
Well, I would just like to say, Board Member Sparks?
So I just have 2 follow-up questions. I guess my first question would be to Board Member Eslick's question pertaining to how we're picking the individuals that are participating. I guess the answer that I'm hoping to hear is that there's no way possible that we're being discriminatory in picking those that are participating in the group. Is that confident, or can we be confident in knowing that our process is not in a way?
I think we can be absolutely confident. One thing to think about though is that when I first got to the district, I asked my administrative assistant, Stephanie Graham, for, like, can you send me a list of people that were on a diversity committee, right? There were 3 of them, right? There were 3 lists floating out there, and I think I got an email from Kevin White, and there was all these sort of groups. But when I, digging into that, just found out it was all invitation only. And as I started talking to staff, there were staff that felt like they weren't invited in on the conversation, and they would have liked to been invited in on the conversation. And I think there was this real big push that we want everybody to be a part of the conversation that wants to be a part of the conversation. And there was just, you pick people, and that's kind of, it's this idea like, oh, she's really good at teaching reading, so we're going to always pick her for our reading stuff. And I think it was just one of those things. But I think, to Board Member Eslick's point, I think there were people who wanted to be a part of the conversation that has not had the opportunity for years, right? And so it's how do we engage those staff members too? And that is certified and classified. I would say of my staff D team, we have 4 classified staff members who come, and their insight is fantastic. And so it's just who are we engaging in this conversation, and how do we ensure that as many voices as possible are heard?
Okay, I appreciate that answer. The other question that I have is a follow-up also, Board Member Marshall, and that is with the empathy interviews that are taking place. Are those interviews taking place where it is possibly superiors interviewing individuals that are working within the same building?
So it's D team members.
So it is
Yep.
D team members.
It's D team members.
Is it any way, I'm just thinking, would I be very open and honest if I'm possibly talking to someone that ultimately could possibly retaliate against me? And so I guess that is just a concern of mine, and I just want to make sure that people are actually able to be free in their speech.
And they're sharing, absolutely. Yeah. So I think several building administrators did participate, but I think that speaks to a larger conversation around just culture, right? I think what we saw was that staff members were blown away that their building administrators cared about what they thought, right? And not just cared, like, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna close my door, and I'm gonna ask you questions, and I'm not gonna respond to them, right? I'm not gonna try to fix what you just said or explain it away. Like, I'm truly going to listen. That's where our staff is, and that is a shift in culture, right? It's one thing to say that we care what our staff thinks and how they feel and what our students say and feel. It's another to actually put that in motion, and we're really trying hard. And I hope that as we continue with this process, that it is truly seen as a moment to listen and to learn, and that is it. But I would say I've heard the opposite. I've even heard it from students, maybe even the one that lives in your home, that said that I feel like they're listening to us. And I said, really? Why do you say that? And they were like, because what you say, they're saying that over there too. I think you all are talking to each other, right? Like, that's how transparent we want our staff and our students and our families to feel when it comes to, we truly want to learn to get better, right? But if that ever happens, you let us know.
I will.
I know you will.
My one last question is, I know that you said as a goal, 60 D-team facilitators is what our goal is, but we have only 30 that have signed up.
Hold it. Give me some time. Give me some time.
Give you some time. I'll give you some time. But this is just a question. If we don't reach our goal, which I hope we do reach our goal, but if we don't, do we have a plan B of making sure we reach our goal?
I have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. So here's what's going to happen. If we don't get our 60, right, what we do have is we have several buildings that have more than 2 people that have volunteered. We also have individuals over here in this building that have volunteered to go through that training. We'll just leverage some district trainers, and we'll do exactly what we did in the text review process, which you're going to hear about later, and we just deployed in the buildings and did trainings, right? So it's going to happen regardless. The question is, who's doing it? And then sometimes if we may have sort of this smaller pool this year, we'll open it back up again next year and build our forces up. It's not going to stop the work. It's just going to be flexible in who facilitates the content. Yeah, but, and I'm glad you asked that, because you'll hear about the text review process more, and I'll explain that process more. But really wanted today, or this moment, to be the opportunity to really highlight this board priority exclusively and the work that was done all year in support of it.
President Campbell, I have one more question.
Okay, thank you.
All right. The other question that I have is my last question, and that is, to what you just said, if we do not have individuals that are volunteering to do this, and then we may go back to buildings that had multiple volunteers, more than the 2. There's something that was said from the presentation, I believe, from Lee Summit High School, which was in talking about the non-negotiables. From the constituents that I have spoke with, and some are staff, and then also some that are just community leaders, we want to make sure that this work is not it's not a option. That this work truly is embedded in the culture of our district of LSR 7, but also that if this work is meaningful for our buildings and our students are benefiting from feeling like they belong, then to assure that every staff person is participating and is actually receiving this same learning in PD, are we going to make sure that's happening?
Yes.
Okay.
That will happen next year, even if we have buildings that don't have 2 staff members. If we have a building that just has 1, and then I go out and we co-facilitate together. So that will be the plan. I think when we think about defacilitators, they're going to give up 4 days of their summer in July. And that is a lot to ask, but we have a lot of front loading that we have to do because we also live in the reality that we aren't sure what COVID's going to do next year, and we can't leave all those days up to subs, right? We got to just be ready for it. And so it's one of those things that we are asking summer work. So we're going to get as many people as we can, knowing that I've had several people reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, I wish I could. I'm out of the country that date, right? And not attending that training is not an option. Everybody has to go through that training, right? That is the non-negotiable, and then we'll figure it out in regards to what schedules and who's going where, and then we'll offer it back up again next summer if we need to.
Great. Thank you, Board Member Sparks. And I'll just take a minute, and then we'll wrap up for this evening. But Shelley, I just want to say thank you. You and Dr. Buck said we're going to take this work and we're going to move it out to the building level. And you have achieved that. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank every person that participated on the D teams. I want to thank all of the staff and students at our buildings that participated and supported so people could participate in the D teams, because this work is important. As a board, we've said this work is important. Our culture in our district will be this work. And so I'm excited to see this transition. You know I'm going to ask, what are our metrics going to be this next year? What are we going to be tracking now that it's down at the building level, which I'm very excited about, but at the board level, at the district level, I just want to know what metrics are we going to track to make sure that this is happening every day in our buildings and in our administration. And you don't have to answer that right this minute.
Oh, I was going to start. Oh, we're time. Okay. We'll get way past. Yep. Yep. I appreciate it. Well, there are.
Awesome. And that's great. And thank you so much. Progress, metrics, budget items, those are the things we're really going to want to track with you. But thank you all so much. Appreciate it tonight.
Thank you.
President Campbell, I just would like to ask that if there's additional things that any of us would like to talk about and we need to do a part B of this work session, I would like to make sure that also happens.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Adding it to the list.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. You too. And with that, I think we'll close our work session and move on upstairs.